I'm Allison. Thank you for joining me for Where I'm From 178. This is our third time, so you may feel a little canned here at the beginning. Um, I read this book. My friend gifted it to me for my birthday. And when she did, she said, I hope you haven't read it. I have read it because it's an amazing book. But I was grateful to listen to it again. So, Brian,
Yes.
we're going to
uh,
try this. The third time's the charm. Otherwise, we'll just move to Zoom or
yeah,
something.
I'm not touching my phone. It's on a mount. So
No
I,
way.
but anyway, um,
Every time it happens, I'm like, no, because we just get past the second where we were just before. So I'm not going to say anything about co-writing.
okay,
Please just,
that's fine. Yes, I started translating in the early 90s. Probably like maybe maybe even in 89 when I was in Japan. And I was assistant English teacher, and one of my coworkers brought over to me this printout of an article that his friend had written, and it was about his friend built harpsichords,
oh,
and he needed an article on harpsichord tuning and maintenance translated into English for an academic journal. And I was already fluent in Japanese, and I could read the article, but I needed to have my dictionaries at hand, could, look up little things.
hmm
And and that was the very first thing I had ever translated for somebody else. I do remember that I was paid for it because I was subsequently able to go out and buy the entire. Phillips had just released a CD collection of everything Mozart had ever done.
Whoa.
In yeah, in I think it was like the 200th anniversary of his birth
hmm
or something like that, or maybe his passing.
I
And
wouldn't know.
yeah.
So you can say whatever.
um, and we're talking about like hundreds of CDs. It was just,
Yeah.
and yeah, so I went out and bought that and kept translating because the money was fun. So,
Yeah. Money is fun. I agree. It's interesting we're talking about translating because I just read this book, reread this book by Jump Lahiri, who loves translation and, translates her work from whatever, English to Italian, Italian to English, does all the, she loves translation and it's a very important part of her creative process.
yes.
Do you use it in your creative process, Brian?
Um, yes, actually, that's I should say I have started work on my second book, and my
Congratulations.
second. Thank you.
Because that means you wrote a first book,
I
which
did.
takes
Yes.
congratulating, regardless of where it is or what's happening with it. You did it.
It's the
So
manuscript is with it.
congratulations.
The manuscript is with an
Yes.
agent.
And our fingers and toes are
And they,
crossed for you.
yes, and mine are too. And so the second book is going to be something of a personal color atlas, and I'm going through. I've got like 365 days worth of traditional Japanese
hmm
colors, and each one. So I'm translating the names, and then I'm just doing this sort of freestyle essay called a zuihitsu, which is basically let the pen go wherever the pen wants to go. And so each day starts with a color inspiration, and I just go for about 4, 5, sometimes 600 words, writing whatever comes to me. And the theme is, well, the inspiration is that color, and sometimes I talk about that color, and sometimes I don't. Um,
I love that idea. That's
yeah.
beautiful.
So yeah, working on that. So so the title of the book actually is one of the color names is this beautiful shade of color, beautiful shade of purple, and the Japanese name is Futari Shizuka. And my translation of that is the stillness of two people.
Mm.
And it's such a fascinating name for a color. I haven't yet gotten into the etymology of why it's called that.
Mm. hmm
Um, but compared to some of the other, some of the colors are botanically inspired, or name some of the dyes that they were used
Hmm.
to make those colors. But every now and then they get something really, really poetic. And that, I think that Tali Shizuka was one of the great examples of that. Um, the other thing for me that fascinates, and I sorry, I can talk about this forever. Let's put that aside. Um,
I'm
but
interested though because I also my kids have taken some Japanese and one is very into it, and so I hear him walking around the house doing Duolingo and speaking Japanese, and we've hosted some Japanese students, and like I mean, it's a beautiful language. I just like to listen to it. Like
yeah,
I don't
yeah.
know really much
Well,
at all, but
I,
it's
I will
beautiful.
say I will say that speaking of Japanese color, one of the perpetual arguments that my husband and I have is that in English the green light is green, but in Japanese the green light is blue.
Mm.
And um, because the color ao um, isn't really blue, it's sort of a bluish greenish color originally. And although modern dictionaries will map owl to blue, it's sort of not really. Indigo is closer to blue. There's a color for lapis lazuli that's very, very blue, rudi in Japanese. But owl is in this weird sort of liminal space between blue and green. There's a color for green too, midori, the liqueur that
Hmm.
some people know.
Hmm.
But yes, that vivid green.
Yeah, yeah,
But the but the traffic light
right.
isn't midori; it's owl. So, but anyway, I'll leave that
It's
for
fun
this.
to have people in your life who engage in these same kinds of questions. You know, like I think that
Yes,
is part of love or partnership or relationship. Like that somebody just wants to sit and talk about these things. I mean, I could see a similar conversation happening here, and I just have felt, and I think your poem talks about like, and many of the poems do. Like, we didn't feel a lot of that when we were younger, and I think that when
mhm.
you find that later in life, it's
Yes,
profound.
I agree. I agree.
So, on that note, would you like to read your poem?
I would. I would. Where I'm from, I am from Uproot. I am from the new television in the living room, next to the fireplace where my Matchbox cars waited in rows. But I am also from No, You Can't Watch Mr. Rogers, and No, You Can't Watch Love American Style. I am from the split level in Westbrookville, the dainty Craftsman in Tappan, the Hudson-facing apartment in Nyack, and the Victorian in need of repair up the hill. I am from Grandma McManus's peonies. See the ants, Brian? And dogwoods, with their drops of Christ's blood at each petal's tip. And I am from Aunt Betty's favorite, the lilac bush in the sideyard, a lavender explosion each May. I am from soda bread and corned beef on St. Patrick's Day, from boiled turnips and rutabagas, from mint jelly at Easter and Nanny's mince pies at Christmas. I am from Uproot, from the liturgical arguments my father loved, from the stories of Grandpa McManus's wooden leg, from men who talked and women who laughed. I have my mother's nose and eye color, and my father's hair and eyes. Sorry, my father's hair and ears. I am first, 3 times over, first child, first McManus grandchild, first Watson grandchild. I am therefore spoiled and forever special in the eyes of my mother and of my father's sister, Anne. And yet, I am also from the closet, from knowing I am different at age 11, from lies told with ever increasing skill. I am from uproot, from whispered diagnoses, from Roman Catholic everything, from abundance to nothing in the space of 5 years. I am from the sunroom facing Jefferson Street, where my father, at 38, died without me. I am from a headmaster running down the hill to ferry me, at 14, to the grief I quickly ran from. I am from letters in my father's uneven hand, hoping in vain that I become a bishop, and notes in my mother's loops and swashes, the style I embody. I am from uproot, from closets I agree to maintain, from a mother who breaks with history, from her silence back to her love in the space of 2 years. Thank you.
Thank you. It's beautiful. Um, so much here. For me, my brothers are Catholic and my father is Catholic, but I was not raised Catholic. So I knew lots of families who had the child that they hoped would be a priest or a bishop. And I feel like that has not the case so much now, but
Yeah,
it was very much these large Catholic families. And I think it was often a boy who was in a closet of some kind, you know? It was some
yeah.
kind of compromise that was made with themselves.
So the the interesting thing is that all of my father's brothers went to seminary, which is a school to learn how to become a priest,
Hmm.
but none of them made
Yeah. I mean, I get
it.
it.
And my father, actually, my father did not go to seminary out of high school. When my father was very bright and had been skipped ahead several grades, which was a thing that you did in the 50s,
Yeah.
um, and graduated high school. Um, and a friend of his father also departed, um, died very early. And so a friend of his father's set up a scholarship for my father at Fordham in the Bronx. And my father went, but because he was 2 years younger than everybody else, he didn't last very long. And so he went into the army. Um, and out of the army, he married my mother and then kept working. And then somewhere in the middle of, he had like 9 years of heart attacks before he passed.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah, yeah. Um, but somewhere in the middle of that, he either recalled or thought anew that he had a vocation.
Mm.
Um, and it wasn't to be a priest because that, he was married, and that was not an option, but it was to become a deacon. And so he studied and went to seminary and became a deacon, I think about 3 years before he passed. And from that point on, the focus, was he was hoping I would be a bishop. He was hoping my brother Kevin would be a parish priest because, Kevin was the kind of kid who you could see growing up to be the priest who hangs out with the kids and
Hmm.
plays basketball and sneaks a cigarette behind the rectory.
Hmm.
Whereas I was just always so smart and, uh, the idea I think he I think he had in his mind this funny idea that I would look fabulous in in a bishop's robe and mitre.
I
And
mean, they are fabulous.
yes, I would have. I absolutely would have
Hmm.
rocked it. But but the other thing is that when I was young in fourth grade, I remember when we were preparing for the sacrament of confession, the parish priest described what a vocation was. And he also mentioned that because he had had a vocation, he didn't have any girlfriends growing up. And yeah, fourth grade is a little bit young to be thinking about girlfriends, but my classmates said that they had girlfriends,
Sure.
and I didn't. And I mean, I had friends who were girls,
Yes.
but and I remember this sort of sudden flash going, oh my God, do I have a vocation? Because I don't think about girls that way. Um, and thankfully, it didn't last very long. Um, Perhaps because my father passed and he wasn't around to pressure me
Mm.
into it. But yes, and yeah. So dodged a bullet.
I feel like it was just so much more common, this
Yeah.
idea of your children becoming
Hmm.
priests or nuns, or, I mean,
Yep.
it's
Yep.
just not.
I mean, I think about the priest who married my parents and then baptized me. He became a family friend, of course, Father Whalen, um, good old Irish American. And looking back, I'm thinking he was gay.
Yeah,
Um,
I think it was for some a real, I mean, I think it gave them a space, a place to be for
yeah,
some people. Not everyone, but
yeah. So,
it couldn't have been easy. It's not easy now, but it certainly wasn't easy then. Um, but also all the flowers. I I love it when
oh
people
yeah,
talk about all the flowers, and Matchbox cars, which are hold a special place in my heart because I grew up with four older brothers, so there were lots of Matchbox cars, and
yeah.
I never really watched Love American Style, but I really loved the theme song, and I
Yes, so
just wanted
same.
to watch the show because it was not appropriate. I was tiny, but
Right,
oh
right,
my God, that
exactly.
theme song
Well,
was
it
so
was
good.
on. It was on right after. So, like, I think it was Friday nights. You had the Brady Bunch, and then the
Oh,
Partridge Family, and then Love
yes.
American Style.
Yes, because it
And
was like the grown up.
right, and
Hmm.
so I could watch Brady Bunch, and I could watch Partridge Family,
Hmm.
but as soon as that music came on, and it was Love, Love,
Yeah.
Love, I was like, I want to watch this, and my father was like,
Yes.
No, no, no. Um, as for Mr. Rogers, though, I I didn't think about it much. As a 4-year-old, I didn't think about not why I wasn't able to watch Mister Rogers, but at
Why weren't you
years.
able to watch Mr. Rogers?
So I my father's sister Anne, who appears
Hmm.
in the poem, she's the keeper of family stories, and she lives out in Maine. And Hero and I went out to see her a couple of years ago. One of my cousins got married in New York, and then we drove out to Maine. And we sat around the table, the dining room table, that used to be in that house in Westbrookville, the same table. Um, and Anne started telling all of these stories, and thankfully, Hero had his video camera going, and
Oh, nice.
yeah. Um, but one of the stories was apparently my father did not want me to watch Mister Rogers because he thought I would turn out that way.
Which caring,
Yes, yes,
sensitive,
and yeah,
thoughtful.
uh, he thought that Mister Rogers was, you know, this was
Oh,
1971. I
and
guess he thought, yeah,
he was all those things, and that meant something else.
that meant
Mm-hmm.
something else. For my father who grew up the way he did,
Mm-hmm.
and went to the army, yeah, um, and um, and I had to laugh because, of course, I did turn out that way. Sensitive and kind and caring, but
Right,
also
right.
limp of wrist. And but and the reason it came up is because my father died before I could come out to him, and
Mm-hmm.
I have for the longest of times wondered how he would have reacted, right?
Mm-hmm.
And Anne's position remains that something something changed in him, both during his illness, but especially during his years in the seminary, learning to become a
Mm-hmm.
deacon. And he wasn't the same bigot that I remember from early childhood.
Mm-hmm.
And Anne is very confident that my father would have been perfectly fine. He would have he might have reacted a little bit unexpectedly in the beginning,
Mm-hmm.
um, but she immediately looped Hero into the conversation. He said, "Oh, Hero, Brian's father would talk your ears off because he would be the person to tell you all of the terrible stories about having to argue with you as a child." And I was a very argumentative child, um, as he wanted me to be, I think. Um, but I will say this about Hero: whenever we have visited uh, the graveyard. where my father is buried, in Nyack, New York, Hero will come with me, and and not only hold me at the graveside because I will always cry, um, but he will also uh, greet my father in Japanese and tell him that we have been away for too long and apologizes for that. All of the formal things that you will say in Japanese. And then he will also um, do another very Japanese thing. He'll go and try to find a bucket and some water and something to scrub with, and he'll clean the headstone um, with me. And um, my if my cousins, I have two cousins who are Jewish. If my cousins have been to the graveyard to visit my grandparents, my McManus grandparents, they will also come to my father's grave and leave stones there
Mhm.
as well. So Hero will ask about that without fail. It's just because yes, it's because they're Jewish. Um, but yeah, it's good in a way because it's a one-stop shop. My father is buried in the same graveyard as my his parents and as my mother's parents. So I get to see them all. um, and even though they're not close together, um, and I have to ask my cousins for directions every time. But I can only remember my father's graveyard. I can never remember where everybody else is.
I
Um,
find cemeteries very disorienting.
yeah, yeah,
I
yeah,
think because of the emotion too,
yeah,
and just I think for me, when I step in them, some people are freshly grieving, and you're aware of
yeah,
that. And,
yeah.
I mean, it's a very emotional place.
Well, the good thing about that cemetery is right next door is one of the oldest bakeries in Rockland County. And I remember as a kid going there like early on Saturday mornings to get their rolls and their bagels and their super fresh, perfect. And I brought Hero with me one time, and he couldn't believe that you could actually walk into the area where they had the production lines
Mm,
and the bagels
hmm
just coming out of the oven
hmm
and into the trays, and you could pick them up
hmm
right there. And he's like, "Are we allowed in here?" Yeah, we are. Um, and so yeah, we had you know, I got the things that I miss, like black and white cookies and bagels. Another thing that we argue about because he believes that Montreal bagels are far superior to New York bagels. And
Aw, that's sweet.
yes,
That's really sweet. I've never heard anyone say any place but New York is the best. So that's news to me.
we had to go to Montreal for his green card interview. We were living in Canada,
Mm,
and the only place that you can get a green card interview in Canada is Montreal. And we were living in British British Columbia
hmm
in Vancouver area. So we flew out there in March. Oh God,
hmm
in March for the interview, and I took him to the Jewish neighborhood, and we had some traditional foods, but also lots of bagels. And he was like, "This, enlightened all of a sudden. Bagels, these are good. These are not like Costco bagels. These are not like."
Sorry. I
So
don't like
yeah,
bagels enough to eat that crap.
yeah,
Like I
okay.
can only eat the good ones. You know, this love is not strong enough for
Yes,
not the good
for
ones.
Costco bagels.
Yeah. Um, so
Yeah,
he had the moment. It
yeah,
was a
he did.
different experience.
Yeah,
So what was
yeah,
we need to wrap
yes.
up soon
Okay.
because sorry, I have to go pick a person up. Um, what was your experience like writing this, Brian? Obviously, you think a lot about these
Hmm.
questions. I mean, because I can just tell by your answers. So, what was the experience like for you writing it?
Well, to be honest, when you first gave me the assignment back in October, I wrote out a completely different poem,
Mm-hmm.
um, or at least started to. Um, and then I don't know. I think maybe about a month ago, I picked that up and I looked at it and thought about finishing it, and I said, mm, I'm going to start over.
Mm-hmm.
I don't, for whatever reason, it just wasn't working for me. Um, and um, most of it just came out in a rush. I guess because when I first wrote in October, I was trying very carefully to do the Mad Libs,
Yeah, yeah.
to go through and plug
Mhm.
piece into whole, um and it's sort of the new poem sort of starts off in that way, but then I let myself go, and um you know the the story about my maternal grandmother, about the plants, the flowers especially, it's one of the few good memories I have of her. So I will tell that story a lot. And um, but it, there just seemed so much that needed to come into this poem, and at some point I was like, no, let's just pick these little tiny moments, and string them together, um, and see what happens. And I realized that I was repeating I am from Uproot. Um, and I am very much an Afro person. I do like to repeat things in my writing a lot. Um, but um, but I struggled. Should I cut this? No? Okay. I think it's okay. Um, and yeah, I let it go. And you know, I, as somebody who writes about growing up in the closet a lot, um, I think I've tread on those um, ruts in my
Mhm.
memory a lot,
Mhm.
and so most of that was easy coming, and also not as painful as it would have been even 4 years ago.
Mhm.
Um, so so yeah, um, that's what it was like writing it. Um, I didn't. Every now and then I will break down when I'm writing something else, but not this poem. Um, this felt good. It felt um, healthy to write about this, um, even though it talks about some terrible things. But um, but the way it ends, my mother was very good. She told me to stay in the closet, but within the space of 2 years, she was like, out volunteering with people with AIDS and meeting gay people, and I was a continent and an ocean away, and she was on the phone, and all of a sudden wanted to be back in touch with her firstborn, as she continues to call me. Um, and yeah, she does. uh, and so we made it up, which is good. Uh, although Hero will probably tell you otherwise. My mother has no filter, and poor Hero is occasionally on the on the receiving end of too many questions from my mother about too many things. So, but yeah, I'm like, no, this is not an American thing. This is not. No, this is
No,
my
we're
mother.
not all. I mean, there's just, sure, a lot of us. I want to say though, I'm glad you had a good experience writing it, and that I think you just talking about how it's different than it would have been 4 years ago. I feel like it's an important reminder to all of us that the words that we write are important,
Mm.
if only to us. Like, think of how far I feel very similarly to a lot of the stuff I write about, like, um, the loss of my brother, being raped. Like, these things are things that I were so painful to talk about. I couldn't talk about them without crying or feeling shame, or some very heavy
Yeah, yeah,
feeling. And it's like, it's helped me so much writing about it and being in community with other writers to understand that shame is not mine, that all
yeah.
these, it's not heavy, it's not shameful. I mean, it can be heavy, but it's changed my life. It's definitely changed my life. And so I loved hearing you say that you feel like you've.
Well, I think another thing that's really changed over the past 4 years, and is that I used to think that coming out was the be all and be all
Yeah,
of
yeah.
everything. And the more I wrote about my choices in Japan of choosing when to be in the closet, when to be out, the more I realize that people now need to know that it's okay to choose safety. It's
Yeah.
okay to pick your time,
Mm-hmm.
to pick your audience, because you're not guaranteed that safety anymore. I don't think you've ever been, actually, to be honest.
I agree. I
Um,
sadly I agree with that.
yeah.
I think for
Um,
all, I mean, for so many of us in different ways, I think safety is a constant
yeah.
concern. And
Yeah. Yeah.
I think to, and again, not to feel shame about that and not feel like you're being a bad fill in the
No,
blank.
right, right, right. I mean, and I think one of the important things about choosing when to not come out is it gives you time and space to get to where you will be safe. Um, I couldn't have found, my husband, the heart where I feel at home,
Mm-hmm.
had I been strident and insistent about being out all the time. I would have lost my job.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
I would have had to return from Japan. I wouldn't have been able to stay for 10 years. So I chose to be safe. I chose to be quiet, and I was rewarded for it, and I hope others will be too when they realize that they can wait for safety, that they can wait for happiness, that it doesn't that coming out isn't a requirement, isn't an immediate, urgent requirement when you realize that who you are. Yes, it's painful. Yes, you will need to get over that. But what are the options, right? You have to. I would prefer that more queer people survive, especially now. And so, yeah, um,
Yeah.
yeah,
It's heartbreaking that it is a question of survival, but I think it's also naive to pretend that it's not.
yeah,
So,
yeah. Well, and of course, I am to a certain extent lucky. I am a cisgender male,
mm,
um,
yeah.
on the non-binary spectrum, to be sure.
Mm,
Um, but at the same time, I hear other gay men, and I purposely identify as queer, but other gay men say, "Oh well, the drag queens and the transgender people, it's not that important to us." I said, "No, no, it is, because they're not going to stop
right.
with the transgender people. They're not going to stop with the drag queens. They're coming for all of us."
Yeah.
And the sooner you realize that, the better. So yeah.
No,
But anyway,
stopping isn't really on the menu. I don't
no,
think.
I know, I know.
I don't think stopping anywhere is really on the menu.
Nope.
But I don't
Yeah,
think many of us who were paying attention are surprised. We're heartbroken, we're
yeah,
devastated, but I don't
yeah,
think we're surprised. So we just keep on doing what we do
yeah,
and speaking up and supporting and being in community. And that's what I know to do to keep going. And I believe all our stories matter.
yeah. I
So
agree.
I'm grateful for yours. Thank you for sharing it with me today.
You're welcome.
And you've improved my life by being in it and sharing your story. So thank you,
Thank you
Brian.
very much for saying that. I thank you for this opportunity. It's been fantastic.
Yeah, my pleasure. So thank you for everyone who joined us. And
And we made it. We did
we did
it.
it. We did it. Third time was the charm. Okay. Bye, Brian.
Bye bye.